After an 8-month internal investigation, not a whole lot was found. The Supreme Court revealing they still don't know who was behind that bombshell leak that overturned Roe v. Wade. The report did suggest it's unlikely the leak was a result of a hack, but perhaps came from the nearly 100 employees who did have access to the draft opinion. Now, this is really interesting as well. Some of the people interviewed admitted to investigators that they had told their partner about the draft opinion, but it's still unclear whether the 9 justices themselves were actually interviewed. You'll recall that the justices called this one of the worst breaches in the trust of the court's history. Investigators did recommend a couple things, Savannah: stiffer security and a much smaller distribution list.
I mean, this is crazy, okay? The Supreme Court was, telling the United States, the people here and around the world, that the leak of the Roe v. Wade, the Dobbs decision, the leak of that decision, the draft decision that Alito penned, actually put Alito's life in danger. He said that the leak of this decision that is so unpopular, okay, that only Republican states are, happy about it, and not the people who live in the Republican states, but the governors who are riding this, a Dobbs decision to what they feel will be a victory in the primary season with the crazy base voters. Anyway, he said that his life had been threatened, that he was, scared that he'd be assassinated. And he, the Fox News and the OANs and the Newsmax, we have to get to the bottom of this and find out who told Politico, because that's where the leak was given. It was given to Politico. Who did that? Who did that? We have a right to know. We want to know. Well, there's an investigation. Well, the Supreme Court decided that they would investigate themselves. Now, here's the opening question that you should have about this. If Alito felt that his life was being threatened and that he was being targeted for assassination, don't you think that should have been referred to the FBI, who has professional investigators who could get to the bottom of it, who could figure out, what the hell, who? They didn't do that. They put the Supreme Court has a marshal or something like that, and they decided that Miss Curley, that's her name, Gail Curley, she's the marshal of the Supreme Court, who has absolutely no investigative background. She's not a police officer. She's not an agent of any law enforcement, apparatus. Anyway, she is the marshal of the Supreme Court. They said, okay, she can investigate it. We'll put her in charge of it. Okay. And she came up empty. She has no idea. No idea. Of course, they did not interview the justices themselves, which I find fascinating when you consider that one of the justices is married to a very, very active activist. I honestly, and one of them is like a handmaid of praise or some, weird thing, right? But Alito said that his life was in danger. He was being threatened, and they didn't go to the law enforcement. They didn't go to the FBI. They didn't report it to for investigation to any law enforcement at all. And so this investigation into the leak, which they said was a bombshell and a breach of confidence and a breach of trust, and they couldn't figure out who the leaker was. They couldn't figure it out. She couldn't figure it out. Gail Curley couldn't figure it out. And so, like some of the FBI investigators who were interviewed yesterday, they said this was a sham investigation. They don't want to know. They didn't want to know, okay?
When is an investigation really not an investigation? When you're told what you can and can't do. You can't do what you need to do or talk to the people you need to talk to solve the investigation, and when the investigation isn't conducted by professional investigators. Let's level set here, because there have been some things said that I think we need to clarify. Number one, the U.S. Marshal Service did not conduct this investigation.
Right.
This investigation was conducted by someone called the Marshal of the Supreme Court.
Right.
I'm sure she's a wonderful person.
Right.
But she has no law enforcement training or experience.
Right.
She's in charge of securing the building called the Supreme Court building and its justices. That's what she does. That's who they gave this to in this most egregious breach of security in history of the Supreme Court, allegedly, as the court statement says. Something else that didn't happen here. If you want to do a real serious leak investigation, You're going to talk literally to every person who may have had access to whatever it is that leaked. From what we can see so far, while they may have talked to 100 people, they didn't talk to ex-clerks. They didn't talk to the very universe of people who may have done the leaking and then left the court to go on to, as they all do, some great legal job. They didn't talk to those people. They didn't call the FBI because you know what would happen? Then a real case would have happened.
Right.
They would have actually had criminal process. Someone stole government property. Someone mishandled government records. Potentially a crime. They could have had subpoenas of former clerks and former employees. They would have had that leverage over them. They could have subpoenaed phone carriers and internet providers. And they could have seen who was talking to whom and when at the media platform that obtained this information.
Political.
All of that could have been done. We still have, according to the New York Times reporting today on this, we have no evidence that the justices themselves were interviewed. And let's understand something. This person called the Marshal of the Supreme Court, her boss is the court. They pay her salary.